Welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast with Matthew Eels.
You staring at me?
No. I was just thinking how weird it is that we choose someone to spend our life with and we just live together and eat together, sleep together.
I love coming home to you. I miss you when I'm not with you. I want to have kids with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. First time I saw you, I fell in love with you. Why is that weird, Val?
Just is.
That's the trailer for Your Love Is Mine. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Cinema Australia podcast. My name is Matthew Eels. In this episode, I'm joined by Luke J.S. and Luke Wijayasinha-Gray to discuss Your Love Is Mine, a moody and atmospheric relationship drama with a touch of horror. And when I do say horror, I mean it. When the horror hits, it hits hard. Your Love Is Mine explores the depths of love and desperation and tells the story of a couple whose relationship is put to the ultimate test when a sudden tragedy strikes. As one partner goes to unimaginable lengths to preserve their union, the film delves into the emotional extremes that love can drive us to. Your Love Is Mine stars Senie Priti, Ellis Jr and Maurial Spearim. It's always a thrill to speak with independent filmmakers who are starting out in their career, and I really can't wait to see what these two do next. Your Love Is Mine is available to stream now via Bounty Films. On a side note, I recently spent time at the Adelaide Film Festival and I was overwhelmed by the support I had from general festival goers who approached me to say hello and to let me know that they love listening to this podcast and that they love reading what Cinema Australia has to offer. So if you're listening now and you did come up to me and say hello, I'd just like to say hello back and thank you very much for listening. I'd like to let everyone know that if you do see me around, please feel free to say g'day. I'm always up for a chat and I love to hear what you've got going on. Anyway, enjoy. Luke and Luke, thank you for joining the Cinema Australia podcast. It's great to have you on.
Hi.
Thanks for having us on, Matthew.
You're very welcome. I watched Your Love Is Mine yesterday in preparation for this interview, and I found that I enjoyed it just as much as I did the first time I watched it a few years ago. It was interesting because as I was watching it, I remembered almost every scene of this film. That's how much of an impact it had on me over 2 years ago. I still think about this film often, and I'm quite often telling people, to seek it out. That's a testament to this great piece of art that you've created. So congratulations on this film, guys. You should be really proud.
Oh,
Thanks.
Wow. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's high praise, and it's very much appreciated.
Your Love Is Mine had its first public screening at a Night of Horror Film Festival in 2022. I just can't believe that it was over 2 years ago now, or almost 2 years ago. That's where I caught it. How was the film travelled since then?
So we did from there. I think the next festival we did was Midwest Weird Fest, which is kind of they're like a sister festival to a Night of Horror, and then from there we did a couple others in a festival called Cabin in the Woods, which was a cool one because we didn't get to attend, but the premise of that one was like the director hired cabins in the Washington forest and screened films for the festival goers, which was a cool idea. So we were happy to take part in that one.
You did mention that festival to me earlier, actually, when we had a conversation a few weeks ago. It sounds like such an incredible event. It's a pity that you couldn't attend that one.
Yeah, we didn't get to go over to any of the overseas festivals this time around, which is, I think, something that Luke and I discovered as well, and is like the whole release side of the film and the kind of importance of one having budget put away to be able to go to festivals that are overseas. Yeah, we kind of were very much in the make the film and put it out kind of mind and get it released mind frame, that we didn't really factor that side of it in, which is kind of a shame, but something we've learned, I'd say, going forward.
Yeah, it is very important to get over there and attend these screenings. I could imagine what it must be like to sit, especially with an international audience, to see how your Australian film is being perceived. Luke, you, as you've both just said there, you didn't get to travel with the film, but have you had much international feedback from people who have seen it?
We've started getting, some reviews coming through on Letterboxd and stuff like that. But as for like, nothing's really coming to mind, like in terms of specific international feedback. I don't think so. As far as I know, the screenings all went pretty well, but I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Yeah, Luke J.S, is there anything else that you've noticed there from international audiences?
Maybe we're still waiting to hear
Yes.
from an international audience and get some reviews in from overseas. That'd be so cool to find out what they think. Yeah.
Yeah, and the film has a very European aesthetic about it as well. Is that a correct thing to say? Am I right there?
I don't think it was deliberate if it is there. But maybe, I was born in the UK and was influenced by a lot of European and British films and stuff. So maybe on a subconscious level, there's a bit of a European influence creatively when we were shooting the film. But yeah, it wasn't a conscious decision.
Yeah, and I am interested in getting to hear about some of those films that have influenced both of you. Before we get stuck into speaking about Your Love Is Mine, I want to know more about your creative partnership and how you two got to know each other. When did you first meet?
We first met when I think it was the year that I moved to Melbourne. So I grew up in Darwin in the NT. I moved here in 2012. At the time, I was doing music stuff. I had a band, and that's how Luke and I met. Luke reached out to me because he found one of my band's tracks online somewhere, and yeah, we became friends, and yeah, ended up making this film together. But we didn't. It wasn't. It wasn't that way when we met. We met under very different circumstances.
Yeah, I think I was gonna shoot a music video as well for you at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
And the band that Luke was in ended up not. What was it? You split up, or you sort of changed gears or something. So the music video didn't happen. And I think we decided to catch up one last time just to chat about potentially making another music video at some point. We ended up just drifting off into a conversation about both of our shared love of film and drama and theater and stuff, and started chatting about story ideas. And I think maybe it was on that day that we just decided, let's just make a short film. And then we were going to potentially make this short film 20, 30 minutes long. And I think it ended up, after a few weeks of chatting about that, we decided that it would make a better feature film. So that was the start of this film, really.
So before we get into talking about the film, you just mentioned that conversation that you had about your shared love of movies. Were there any particular films that really, made the conversation, made you pique interest in the conversation about the films that each other were mentioning?
I feel like when we first met, we were more talking about story ideas and what we'd both want to see in a film, rather than, I can't remember, what we were talking. I mean, I guess at the time, the Babadook and The Witch and Warwick Thornton, maybe a few, we chatted about like genres that we both were into rather than films, maybe. I'm not sure, but what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think, now that you mentioned that, Luke, it's jogging my memory a little bit. I think we did both have an interest in kind of darker, or like not necessarily horror, but like sort of darker Aussie films. Maybe Animal Kingdom was another one that we both chatted about. I think, what was that, like 2009 or something that came out?
Oh, that's great to hear. And by the way, have you guys seen Titane? Because that film reminded me a little bit of Your Love Is Mine. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't seen that yet. No.
Yeah, but you've heard about it?
Yeah.
I recommend checking it out. There are some similarities between these two films. I'm not sure if you've heard about those similarities, but they are there.
That's the director, she made Raw. Was that her first film?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Raw. Still haven't seen Titane. Is it Titane?
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Now, what I found interesting last night while I was researching both of you is that your IMDb credits tell us that this is the first film for both of you. And that's so rare to see. Usually, filmmakers, and especially filmmakers who work together, will have a stack of short films behind them as well. Is IMDb wrong there? Have you made anything prior to this?
I haven't. Your Love Is Mine, it was my first anything in screen. I was doing like a little bit of kind of grassroots theatre stuff back in the NT, but I'd never done. Well, I moved to Melbourne to study screenwriting at RMIT, but I hadn't made a short. Luke was working in video production at the time.
I hadn't made a short film. So I'd done sort of cinematography and worked with actors on their showreel scenes and stuff. So that's really how I that was the extent of my experience as well. But I don't know. I guess like, because this was originally going to be a short film, so that would have been our first go. But I think we both just decided, like I said, just to jump in and make it a feature. I think we thought that if we were going to spend all this time making a short film, we may as well just stretch it out and make it into a feature.
It's such a brave commitment on both of your behalf to jump straight into a feature film together. A big part of me wants to yell out, are you guys mad?
I reckon there was definitely like, it's kind of you to say it's brave. I would say naive.
We were super naive at that time. Like, I think I always think that sort of naive optimism that we had kind of saw us through the whole process, and it kept on pushing us forward. If we'd known how kind of hard it would be, we may not have done it, but I'm glad that we didn't know. Maybe, it might have been better as well that we hadn't made a short film, because perhaps if we had made one, it might have put us off making a feature.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I understand that. Now, I do want to talk about, the early beginnings of this film and where the idea came from. But just touching on what you've said just then, when was the moment during the making of this film that made you realize, shit, maybe we were a little bit naive going into this? Was there a particular aspect of the film?
I think probably like almost as soon as immediately when we started the actual production, because we through casting and kind of and preparing for the film, that was all pretty fun from what I can remember now. I mean, my memory could be seeing it through kind of rose-colored glasses, but I feel like the moment we were like, we've probably bitten off more than we can chew was like day 2 or 3 into production. We had we were shooting this, we had like an overnight shoot, and it just ended up blowing out to, we were there all night, maybe something like 14, 16 hours. And we just didn't have enough food for the actors. We didn't have enough chairs for people to sit on, just stuff like that. It was kind of it was a bit of a shambles. And that was the moment we were like, wow, we really kind of don't know what we're doing. and,
Yeah.
and we had to pause and really go, we can't do the rest of the production this way.
Yeah, I think that was in the October, and then we'd scheduled quite a few shoots, but then after that day, I think we cancelled everything and then we started shooting it again the following March.
Yeah.
And that was after we had been able to find a producer and more crew to help us out. So yeah, I don't know what we were thinking trying to do it.
Literally in the beginning, the crew was me and Luke.
Wow.
And one of our actors, I think it might have been Senie, was like, why are you guys doing it this way? It doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. And Senie probably had the most experience. Is that correct?
I think she had Lester had two massive.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd worked on features before, but I think they both had. I mean, all the cast had more experience, I think, in film than both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but so I am keen to go back a little bit further now because it is early October. As I said, I caught the film in 2022. Take us back to the very beginning of this film and how the idea came about, how the discussions that you were having at the time about this storyline and when you began writing. Take us all the way back there.
Yeah, so I had been working on a stage play when I left Darwin. I told Luke about this play, and we initially, if I remember correctly, were going to essentially do like a short film version of this play. But actually, I've said this before at times, and I'm cautious of like I don't want. The film Your Love Is Mine is very much not the same thing as this play I was doing, and so I'm cautious of like it's definitely not an adaptation.
Yeah,
but that was how we got started talking about it. Is that fair, Luke?
It started off as a little bit of a fairy tale, Luke's play, and then that triggered all of the conversations that we had, and that's how we started to develop our own characters and the world of the film. And at that point, I think we were meeting up maybe a couple of times a month, and we were just meeting up, going to cafes and bars and just walking the streets, chatting about it, really. And then after about a year or so of doing that, we got a little studio out the back of a jeweler's workshop in Fitzroy. And we started to write regularly there a few times a week then. And that sort of like is where the bulk of the script was written over that year or so.
Yeah.
Were you on the same page creatively instantly? Did you really both agree on what you wanted to do with this film?
Yeah, I think we were, weren't we, Lee?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, yeah. Yeah, like Luke said, the original idea, well, the very first kind of seed of an idea was this, I don't want to say childish, but a much more, fairy tale kind of story. And we did both pretty soon realize and agree on that we wanted, if we were going to do it as a film, that we wanted it to be a lot grittier, more adult.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess the reason that I asked you that question is, because as someone who does this job for a living, we love to interpret subtext of a film and we love to go deeper into a narrative. And I guess it's easy for a general viewer to interpret Your Love Is Mine as being a body horror film, but it really does run much deeper than that. Below the surface, it's an unsettling exploration of the challenges of long-term relationships. How did this narrative come about, and why was it that you wanted to explore that?
Well, I'm glad you got that from the film, Matthew. That's very much what we wanted to do. I guess I can only speak for for myself, it reflects what I was going through at that time in my life, which was this kind of point that I'd been with my partner, who's now my wife, for quite a long time, and we reached this point where it was kind of the relationship can go either way, and for myself, we ended up, my own relationship ended up taking a different path, and we ended up staying together. But we wanted to, with the story of Sam and Violet, look at what happens when those differences can't be reconciled. And yeah, we want, in a way that we hope hasn't been done before, and we wanted to surprise people a little bit and to introduce those kind of horror themes.
Oh, thank you for sharing that story with us, by the way. I know that it's not easy to share these personal stories sometimes, but yeah, thanks for that.
No, that's fine. I guess that's where it came from, was wanting to explore our own experiences of relationships in this kind of really strange way.
Mm-hmm. And Luke, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I was guess same as Luke. There are parts of the film that are definitely inspired by my own experiences as well within relationships, especially the "what do you love about me?" Guess that's a conversation I probably had with at some point. But yeah, I also think that if once we sort of had developed the characters and we'd figured out their personalities and how they were going to engage with each other, it was almost like their stories sort of started to tell in a way, and we were being inspired by, or not inspired, but sort of influenced to fill in some of the gaps, so that kind of like honoring the characters that we'd created and then had sort of taken on a life of their own, and then we sort of felt responsible to fill in some of the gaps so that the audience could understand them a little bit better.
And now you both mentioned, that some of this narrative is based on your own lives and your own experiences, but just to confirm, neither of your partners are running on motorbike parts?
Not at the moment.
So I'm wondering, when did that part of the narrative come into it? When did the body horror side of it come into the script? Was that instant? Did you know that that's where you wanted to go from the beginning?
We always knew that a character was going to be sort of brought back to life right from the beginning, but we hadn't figured out how. That took a couple of years, I think, for us to settle on exactly how that was going to happen.
Oh, gee, I'm really curious now to know about some of the early interpretations of it.
I remember, wasn't it one time we were like even thinking about maybe a lawnmower?
Were we really?
I'm sure we were at some point.
Well, that's probably, that's, I think, the main thing that carried over from the play was, so in my play that from back in Darwin, someone dies and they are resurrected in this kind of clockwork, magical sort of way, and that's the thing that Luke and I knew we didn't want to keep doing. We wanted to do something that was a bit more, body horror and gritty.
But I don't think.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say that with the body horror thing, I don't even think either of us knew that it was going to be body horror.
Yeah, we didn't use that term, but I think we started talking about car park.
So I was going to also say that I guess with the motorbike, I think we might have settled on that idea because we knew Violet was going to ride a bike, and we were thinking, what would be, I guess like metaphorically, what would be the most not cruel, because I don't think he's being cruel. He's basically using the Violet uses her bike as her means of independence and to do her own thing, and when she breaks up with him and wants to ride off into the sunset on her bike, we thought it would be an interesting way to, I guess, like explore that whole entitlement thing and him using the very means that Violet was going to use to get her away and start her new life. Him putting that in her and then using as a means to keep her as close to him as possible. We thought that is pretty horrific and scary, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly is. And when I tell people about that part of the film, it's always met with shock on people's faces. They don't quite know what to make of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm still trying to figure out when, like, because I watched it back recently, just that little part, and even I don't know, like it sort of shocks me a little bit just seeing how like extreme it gets just in that little section of the film.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do want you to talk us through that particular scene a little bit later. I've got some questions about that. But when I first saw the film, I provided you guys with my feedback, which was that the film sits somewhere between a lucid dream and a terrifying nightmare. But it wasn't until my second viewing that I realized how much dreams actually play into Your Love Is Mine. There's certain sequences of this film that could be interpreted as a dream, and especially Lester's character, who tends to, nap and wake up on the couch every now and then throughout the film. It's not always easy to tell when someone may be dreaming. Was that intentional, or am I reading way too much into that?
No, that's absolutely intentional. Yeah, we did want to create a sense of what's really going on here and what's not.
I was going to say, I think the dream part of the film as well it's almost like Sam he has an idea of what he wants his life to be, and a lot of it is in his head, and it's almost like he's living, even when he's in the real world, so to speak, he's living in a dreamland because he's very oblivious to what's going on with Violet and
willfully oblivious at times. I think
yeah.
he really chooses to see some things and ignore other things, which I think we all do sometimes in relationships.
You're listening to the Cinema Australia podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at cinemaaustralia.com.au.
One thing that I'm really looking forward to talking about here is these two performances. As far as what's happening in front of the camera goes, this film wouldn't work as well as it does without these two incredible performances from both Lester and Senie. Firstly, how do you sell a film like this to actors? Do they buy into it straight away, or did it take some explaining?
I'd say probably. I hope this is fair to say to Senie if she's listening, but I think Lester was probably more immediately sold. I think Senie was a bit more. I won't say apprehensive, because Senie was actually the first person we cast in out of any of the roles, and she was always on board. But there were. I'd say she had her character had to, she was the one who did have to go through a lot more. So it's probably why.
Yeah, I think that Violet's going through a lot of crap mentally, and we had to have more conversations about that, I guess, like where Violet was at, why she was at where she's at, and but from memory, I don't remember either Lester or Senie needing to be convinced or anything. They were pretty stoked to do the film, I think. And I think we saw Senie once, I think, for an audition, and then offered her the role maybe the following day, and she accepted. And then I think from memory we offered Lester the role. Yeah, I think, was Lester the last person we cast, Luke?
Yeah, he was pretty. We cast a lot of people, and we had almost gave the role of Sam to someone else, but there was just we weren't totally satisfied, and we kind of thought, let's just have one more look out there to see if there's someone else, because we thought we could make the film with this other actor, but there was still just this kind of little bit of doubt. And yeah, now I'm really glad we held out, because Lester, I think he nails it.
He really does.
And you're right, like the story wouldn't work at all unless we always directed the actors to play it super seriously and straight. We didn't want to ham it up, because it could have been either hilarious or it could have been a total flop. I guess we tried to find a sort of fine line between, we wanted there to be some humor in the film. I guess this is another point I was thinking about earlier today, that we gave a lot of the supporting characters a lot of the lighter, humorous stuff. And
Yes.
the film originally, in the original cut, was almost 3 hours long, because we had given the supporting characters so much to do and
Oh,
their own
really?
story arcs. Yeah. So what we ended up doing to strip the film back, and the supporting characters ended up taking away too much attention from Violet and Sam's story. So we then took a lot of the supporting characters out, but in doing that, we took a lot of humor out, I guess, in general, because we didn't really make Violet and Sam very humorous. I guess if we'd known that this was gonna happen, we might have given Violet and Sam a bit more humor, potentially, to lighten their story up a little bit. But
to your point, Matthew, of how did we sell this to the actors? There was a degree of like, I probably shouldn't say name, who it was or anything, but there were a few times where we had actors, and I think, and even people in the crew saying, specifically with that the motorbike thing, maybe this would be maybe that should be left out, because it is like, on paper, something that can, like Luke said, it can be kind of ridiculous.
Yes.
And like, how is this going to work? And so we did have, a few moments where people were going, maybe this story would work better as just like a straight relationship drama about a relationship ending, or it was at times a tough, like, kind of tricky thing to sell.
Well, I'm really glad that you did keep it in there, and it is such a pivotal scene in the film, and I guess that plays into the dream side of it as well. It leaves a lot of questions for the viewers as to whether it was real or it wasn't real, or what really was happening there. So I'm really glad that you did, and again, I do want to talk about this scene. I'm really looking forward to get into it, but I am building up to it here. I'm wondering how Senie went riding the motorbike. Was that her on the bike?
Not always. We did a few green screen shots of her on a bike, but we did have a body double as well, who was called Sabine Wilson, I'm pretty sure. Sorry, Sabine, if that's not your last name. I'm pretty sure it is, though.
And just one more thing on Senie, because I am a big fan of her work. I don't know if you guys have seen any of her other films. She's also directed a short film as well, which is terrific. And
Yes.
I don't want to take anything away from Lester's performance here, because he is just as great as Senie, but she really is a scene stealer for me in this film. And this entire performance is told through Senie's face, if that makes sense. It's a great example of her range, because her character really does have to she really does have the most emotional layers. Did she take much direction? Can you tell us a bit about directing Senie through this?
Senie was amazing, and it was very easy to shoot Senie, because, like you say, her range is so not just sort of accurate in terms of what we were trying to get from the character, but adding in extra bits, subtext with her eyes, and I always found it fascinating because I was shooting it as well. I always felt like I was observing a real, living person. Violet was real, and when we said action, Senie would become Violet, and we really, I mean, both Lester and Senie, it didn't take a lot for us to, we didn't really have to direct them a lot. We wanted to give them a lot of freedom as well.
Yeah, I was endlessly impressed by Senie. Like you said, Luke, both her and Lester, but because we're talking about Senie right now, yeah, there were so many times where she just surprised me with how with her range and how convincingly she is able to be either completely raw and emotional in that scene where she's on the phone to trying to reach her mum, or then completely like sort of like a like really showing this really gritty side in her relationship with Sam, but then also kind of a really vulnerable, like almost childlike side to her. Yeah, Cena's the best.
Oh,
And very little direction. Yeah, like there was definitely conversations, but it wasn't difficult to work with her at all.
I think with the very first shot of the film when they're in bed together chatting was the very first scene we shot as well. And I think both Luke and I we were buzzing after that, after we'd seen what Senie had brought to the table in terms of the vulnerability that we weren't anticipating, because I think we'd written Violet a little bit
more, maybe a bit colder than Senie really brought a kind of, I think, warmth and humanity. I'm not going to say we wrote a non-human character, but she brought a real presence and an energy to Violet that wasn't there in the script, I reckon.
Yeah, and that inspired us to write additional scenes while we were shooting, literally based on being inspired by Senie's performance.
And speaking of direction, talk us about how you two complement each other as co-directors. How was that experience for you both?
It was interesting. It was, I think for the most part, we complemented and kind of balanced each other. There were times where like we maybe wanted different things, but I feel like we both, because we're first and foremost friends, we, I think, always had that kind of at the heart of like our interactions was, if there was anything that came up where we were not seeing eye to eye, we usually found it pretty easy to move forward or find common ground. Is that fair to say, Luke?
Yeah, I think I always feel like, and I mean, I'll speaking for myself, but I feel like Luke, you were the same with me. If Luke wasn't happy with something, then I wouldn't really be happy to go with my idea because I wanted to just both be on the same page.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we shot the film mostly. And I think what we'd do is we'd block the scene, and then Luke and I would go away and have a bit of a chat about what we were pleased with, what we wanted, how we wanted to direct the actors. And then we'd go and have a chat with the actors and reblock it a little bit. And then we'd go for a take. And we'd try and shoot, we'd only try and shoot as little as possible. I mean, obviously that's what happens on a film set, but we didn't want, and the actors also didn't want to overwork a scene, and we wanted it to be as raw as possible. So usually, especially with Senie and Lester, that would take 1, 2, maybe 3 takes, and we'd nail it.
And Luke, you also shot the film. Was that due to the limited budget that you had, or is cinematography something that you're genuinely interested in?
Well, that was what I had the most experience in at that point. We didn't. I mean, I guess if we'd had the money, we may have gone with a cinematographer. So I mean, maybe it was a combination of necessity and also having a love for cinematography as well.
How did you go balancing the two duties?
I kind of, like I said, the way I approach cinematography is I'm acting as an additional person who's observing what's going on or being a bit of a fly on the wall. So I, we would direct the actors have those chats before we shoot, and then when I was shooting, I was then just a person standing in a room capturing what was going on rather than as I wasn't really thinking as a director then when I was shooting. I was more sort of a fly on the wall, I guess, and like trying to look for the subtleties in performance, get I think I went a bit too close sometimes to the actors' faces, but I most of the time it was deliberate because I love getting like up close and seeing what's really going on um behind the dialogue. And so yeah, I guess it was a split. Half of my brain was directing when we weren't shooting, and then when we said action, I just slipped into cinematography mode. And yeah, it wasn't that hard actually. And yeah, it was stressful, but it wasn't too difficult.
Yeah, it looks absolutely stunning. By the way, I think it's one of the most beautifully captured films that I've seen in quite a while. I'm stunned by this cinematography. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks heaps. Thanks a lot.
I introduced a new component to this podcast a few interviews ago, which is a section where I get filmmakers to talk us through a scene and through the making of a scene. And I guess the most striking scene in this film is the most obvious one, and that scene is transformation scene. There's so much going on, both technically and visually. It's bloody, it's shocking, it's dark, it's lit by candles. Senie is laying still while being knocked about by Lester's hammer and pipes. Can you talk us through this particular scene from your point of view and what it was like to direct that, both technically and creatively?
That scene, I hope it's okay. I'm gonna talk about that kind of whole segment from kind of Lester, or Sam, I'm using Sam and Lester interchangeably. Sam taking Violet to the shed, out of the car, into the kind of operation sequence, and then her coming back to life. Luke and I, when we reflect on that it feels kind of like a dream because we only had access to that shed location for, I can't remember how long it was, a few days, maybe a week or something, and we knew we had all this coverage we needed to get done, and we were doing a lot of, it was all mostly nights, and we also knew that we needed to get that part of the film right, because if we didn't, it would, that's what kind of the whole film was resting on. And if we didn't capture that believably, if it didn't have an emotional impact, I don't think we would have a film. Yeah, so it was stressful and kind of dreamlike because we were pretty sleep deprived. It was really hard on Senie because she had to be in this kind of, death makeup for a while, and that really impacted her emotionally. She, in between takes and stuff, she was getting really sick of looking terrible, but also being in this mind space of like, I'm dead.
Yeah.
And yeah,
we laugh, but it's very serious.
Yeah. Luke and I went in there and kind of, we didn't have to do heaps of set dressing because we literally had this abandoned shed that was on someone's property that was huge. But we did kind of, place a few certain things in there, like the whiskey bottle that we filled with tea, and so Lester didn't have to keep drinking actual whiskey, and a few little things. We set up the bench area, the candles, and all that. But yeah, we were pretty serious with the actors at that point because we were like, this is the part we have to get right out of the whole movie. If we need to get something right, it's this.
But it also felt pretty magical as well. So, on screen it comes across as really dark and gritty and grimy and stuff, but it didn't feel dark on set. Everybody was pretty excited and like eager and keen. And yeah, so there was sort of being a bit fed up of being in death makeup and stuff, which is completely understandable. But I guess like we also tried to shoot everything in sequence as much as possible. We shot the first half of the film. Well, we basically shot everything in sequence, but in two halves. So we shot from the moment that Violet is taken to the shed till the end of the film. We shot all of that first, and then we shot all of the beginning of the film second. So, but we did do it. We tried as much as possible to shoot scene by scene in sequence from the half of the film onwards. But because we were shooting in sequence, it allowed us to build up to this moment, and we were all getting excited. We were getting it is like a dream because it was sort of, and we, like I said, we didn't over rehearse anything. So, when Sam's trying to find the candles and scrub down the operating table and everything, that was all basically everything was one take at that point. And then him taking her out of the car onto the operating table, that was an amazing moment too when we were shooting. And we had other makeup artists come in to help with the body prosthetics. So I mean, yeah, I feel for Senie because that would have been tough just to lie there and lie there and lie there until we got all the shots.
But also because Senie, like, she's so good at what she would always say, like, I'm not just gonna be a dead person. I need to be in like, she needs to actually feel dead, which is I think what ended up messing with her a bit. But
we didn't want, we never really considered Violet to be dead, Luke and I, really. It's more of a metaphorical thing of Stam has lost her. So to Stam, she's now dead. And he's trying to grapple with the grief of being dumped, essentially. But
with that scene, I think I remember really clearly when we actually shot the her coming back to life, there's that moment where she kind of takes that deep kind of gasp. Luke and I remember looking at each other and going, we've got it. Like it feels like you're witnessing this. I remember the feeling. It was like you're seeing something that's really intimate and you almost shouldn't be seeing. Like, it almost feels like witnessing a birth or something.
It was amazing. It was so cool. I always think that whenever I think back to the film, the best part of shooting this film was everything that we did in that shed. Yeah.
I really hope people talk about this scene and the whole film really in as much detail as it deserves to be spoken in about. But you did mention the special effects makeup there, and I took a look into the special makeup effects, and I was surprised to learn that Rose Parson, who's known for makeup effects, is credited as the film's producer, while Julian DeMasi, who has worked on films like Sissy and Girl at the Window, was actually on special effects makeup duties. I just wanted to mention that because the special makeup effects are so great here, especially when he flicks that switch on her back and, the pipe sticking out. Are you just as proud of that as you are that scene?
Yeah, for sure. That was amazing. Julian's work on, it was great because I think from memory he has an amazing attention to detail, and he'd created that bodysuit based on real life pictures that he'd found of autopsy pictures. I'm thinking maybe.
Wow.
I could be wrong, but I think that's what happened.
I also want to mention Beck Smith was our she was like our day-to-day like kind of head of hair and makeup.
Yeah.
But the scene that whole sequence was a collaboration between Julian and Beck. They worked together on and without them we also wouldn't have the the film wouldn't have even though we do try to shoot that stuff sparingly, because Luke and I also knew we didn't want to make that part of the film too kind of grotesque. At the same time, if we didn't have that makeup that came from Julian and Beck, I think we also wouldn't have the film wouldn't have the same impact that it does.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it helped the actors as well. I think it helped, especially Lester, to understand, how it's Sam had got at that point, to see the makeup be that accurate and disgusting. But as Luke said, we didn't. It actually looked worse in real life than you see on screen. Then we, shot it with a lot of candles. There's a lot of shadows. You don't see, a lot of it is what you don't see, I guess.
Yeah.
And that there's that one shot that seeing the film, it's that overhead shot looking down at Violet. I mean, we sort of ummed and ahed about bringing that shot back in because we didn't know whether that was a bit too disgusting. And it is a disgusting shot. But I think a lot of horror fans that had seen the version of the film without that had encouraged us to bring it back.
Wow.
So I'm not sure whether I'm still not sure about that shot in particular, but we did bring it back. So
no, it works fantastic. The scene's absolutely perfect. I'm so glad that you kept that in. And as soon as we finish here, I'm watching that scene again because I just can't get it out of my head. And now that you two have talked me through it, I can't wait to watch it again.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
Well, yeah, I'm so glad that we got to have this chat, and personally, that I got to learn so much about the making of this movie. I don't think I can go on anymore about how big a fan I am of this film, and congratulations on it again. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my podcast guests, which is, have you seen an Australian film lately that has stood out for you, but something that's really caught your attention?
I think the last Australian film I saw was Sting, if that's considered Australian film.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and that was great. That was classic. It felt very like early 90s-esque horror. I don't know. It was great.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that film.
Yeah, Sting was great. I'm a big fan of Kia Roach-Turner. I would say this isn't a super recent release. I mean, it kind of is, but I rewatched it recently. But Justin Kurzel's film Nitram.
Oh yeah, terrific.
That was insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I was blown away by that when I first saw it, and I rewatched it, and just the way that in part it's because as Australians we know where the narrative is leading, but I think just that this kind of feeling of dread and that kind of isolation that the lead is going through is it's one of my probably one of my all-time favorite Aussie films, and not supported by the government from what I believe. But which is kind of like you can kind of understand why, but at the same time, it's I feel like a pretty important movie.
It really is. Sorry,
I was going to say that had a big impact on me as well. Actually, now you mentioned the film, that was so intense.
Yeah, I was a little bit turned off by the film, the idea of the film itself at the beginning, but then once I saw the film, I understood instantly what they were trying to do with it and the message that they were trying to get across. It's much deeper than I think the people will realize. I still know people to this day who just refuse to watch it, despite my attempts to try to convince them to check it out. But I was lucky enough to get Justin and Sean on a podcast episode. So if anyone's out there who wants to listen to that, I recommend having a listen. But Luke, again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join the Cinema Australia podcast and to discuss Your Love Is Mine. I'm looking forward to sharing it with our listeners, and congratulations again on the film.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And I just want to add as well, I think if I've got time, Yeah, I just want to. I think I've thanked you before for your support, because it's so beneficial to indie filmmakers. But I also just want to say thanks for running this podcast, because it's like there isn't much else out there like it. Especially focusing on Aussie films. It's for me, not only as someone who loves Aussie films, it's really cool to be able to have a resource like this, but also to learn and hear from other filmmakers, and it makes you feel a bit more connected to a bit of a community of like-minded people. So thanks, Matthew.
Oh, you're very welcome, and that's very nice to hear. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks for listening. Find all the latest Australian film news at cinemaaustralia.com.au. You can follow Cinema Australia on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok.